one. Hello, welcome to the Jenkins Documentation Office Hours. Today is March 20th, and around the table we have myself, Bruno Vrashton, Meg McRoberts, Mark Waite, Birajit, and Pratik. So thanks for joining everyone. For our agenda today, just some notes on the contributor spotlight and what's coming down the pipeline next. We'll check in about the documentation developer experience with Meg, see if she's had any additional issues or hopefully successes. Go over the documentation fix that was implemented recently for docs.jenkins.io. The 2025 Jenkins Community Awards announcement. Just a note on Design Library 3 now being part of the SIG docs. Google Summer of Code 2025 is pushing forward, and we're getting to another part of the process soon. We'll just go over the Chinese documentation site item that we've had here recently, LTS releases and security advisories that were published. And then Jenkins Contributor Summit, recent work that has been merged or added to the site. And depending on our time frame, the Alpha and Omega documentation project potential, plugin developer docs, and Blue Ocean deprecation. Again, we'll see what time looks like, but we'll get there. Anything else anyone wants to add to the agenda today before we get started? Okay. So then starting off for the contributor spotlight. So we've had Kosuke's published for the last month or so now. And next up, we'll have Yaroslav Afenkin. Yaroslav was working on the CSP project in Jenkins recently. He's also a former member of the Jenkins security team, so he's been involved with the project in multiple ways for quite some time now. We're working on the reviews and feedback and everything right now, so once we've got final approval, we'll be publishing that, and probably by the end of this week or beginning of next week at the latest, we'll have that. And then in addition to that, I've been doing additional interviews, and we have some other submissions and plans to connect with other organizations to see if they'd be willing to provide their stories as well. Lots of great collaboration with the Jenkins project and organizations like JFrog and AWS, and it would be great to be able to share their stories as well. So we're looking to those as avenues on top of the existing contributors. Next up, so we've talked about the documentation developer experience, just getting started and what that might look like. Meg, have you had a chance to try this again, or have you had an opportunity to check on this at all, or are you still running into the same issues?
Well, no, I actually I followed your link to install Docker Desktop. Desktop was better than what I had. It included, I think the key step that may have made everything bad was the need to install GNOME terminal. If you're running Ubuntu with a different desktop. So that went fairly well. And I noticed, small things. And for the make, we don't tell them they have to go into the root of their clone, which once it fails, but that's a small thing. When I get into updating docs, I'll do that. But I still haven't gotten it to work. So, but I haven't been working intensively, so I'll keep at it.
No worries. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, knowing that. And I'm glad the instructions helped a little bit. But if you have any questions or if you ever want to take a look, let me know. I'm happy to help.
Okay, I might. What's your email? I tried sending you something and it bounced. It's not just kmartins@cloudbeats.com?
It should be. Yeah, that does sound like my email if I'm not mistaken. So
Maybe I just made a typo.
yeah, something that happens a lot is my last name can sometimes get misspelled with an I instead of an E at the end, which is pretty common. I've run into that a lot. So that might be a thing, but if not, let me know. I can also email you directly too if that would help just open up the line of communication easier.
Okay, or I could ping you on Git too, I suppose. So
Yeah, whatever works.
Whatever. Okay, cool.
Yeah, cool. Okay, great. I'm glad to hear it. And yeah, we can take a look at that. And if there's any updates that we can make too, we'll be making sure to get that put in there. Thanks.
Okay.
Next up, so the documentation fix that was implemented. So this was something that was brought up by Oleg recently, that the docs.jenkins.io, the version doc site that was being worked on from Google Summer Code 2023 was being found in searches. thankfully, Chris Stern was able to take a look at that and added the necessary robots.txt file to make sure that it doesn't come up anymore. So, thanks to Chris for resolving that and making sure that the doc site doesn't show up when it's not meant to yet. So, great work there. Next up's the 2025 Jenkins Community Awards. This is something that we just created a blog post for. Thanks to Alyssa for putting this together and creating the issues. So this is something that we've been doing at least last year, if not the year before as well. Forget this point in time, but the important thing is the community awards are something that we do to celebrate and appreciate the folks that put all their work into the Jenkins project. So there are 3 different award categories. There's the most valuable Jenkins contributor, advocate, and security MVP. So nominations are open right now until April 14th. Then the awards pages are issues in the Jenkins.io repo. So you can go there and submit your nomination here. Follow the prompt here that Alyssa's provided. There's a link for the CD Foundation and their additional information here as well. And there's timeline, dates, etc., all available within the issues and the blog post and the CDF site. The only thing to be aware of on this is last year's winner cannot win the exact same award this year. So as Alyssa's noted here, Stefan wouldn't be eligible to win most valuable contributor for this year because he won last year. They are eligible for other awards though. So if you feel that Stefan, for instance, again, would be a good candidate for most valuable advocate, then that's totally fine. That works. And yeah, so nomination period's open now till April 14th. Voting starts on the 22nd of April, closes on June 5th, and then the winners are announced at CDCon, which will take place in June this year. Mark, did you have anything else you wanted to add on that, or did I end up covering it?
No, you covered exactly. The biggest concern I had was knowing that last year's winners cannot win a second time for the same item. And I'm glad that it's already included in the page. Don't bother to nominate this person because we will discard the nomination if you nominate. Thanks.
And yeah, we've had a lot of great contributions, a lot of folks that are really involved with the project. So it's great to give them a chance to be honored and just highlighted in such a way. Design Library 3 was something that the UX SIG has worked on and released back in January. So the plugin's available. We had a blog post announcing this as well back in January. Just wanted to share that once again. But Jan Varacek, who's one of the people that was working on this, wanted to make sure that we included it elsewhere in the documentation. So the UX SIG docs have been updated to include the blog post and include this information as well. We're going to look to include this elsewhere as well in the documentation. I was originally looking at ways to include this in some of the plugin documentation, but quickly realized that the plugins themselves would need to be updated to include that documentation. So it's a little bit more extra steps than I was ready for at that time. So maybe we can work on the plugins, folks with the plugin maintainers to get that updated, but we are looking to make sure that this is highlighted around the documentation and not just in the blog post. Next up's the Google Summer of Code. So again, Chris isn't here right now. So where we're at with things is we've had the project overview meetings not last week, but at the beginning of March. The recordings are available here for anyone interested in seeing what the projects are and what they might entail. Right now, we're in the process of having potential contributors submit their draft reviews. Alyssa's created a form for that through Google Forms, so that's available and posted in the Google Summer of Code Gitter channel. There's been a lot of activity there, so please keep continuing the conversations. It's great to see so many people interested in the various projects we have. And the timelines and everything are looking good. And the deadline for the draft proposal review is April 1st. So we want to make sure everything's in there by then. If you want draft proposal review, the actual deadline for proposals is until after that. And then more details will be discussed as we go along. There'll be meetings and other things scheduled for Google Summer of Code. We're not going to have a full conversation about it here. We've been talking about this now for some time. I just want to make sure everyone's aware that things are moving well, and we're really excited about the amount of activity and interest in some of the projects. A lot of people are chiming in and Gitter, a lot of new contributors, and it's really good to see that kind of excitement. Before we move on, Bruno, anything else you want to add or anything you want to highlight there for anyone?
No, I think you were spot on. You just forgot to say that you are one of the mentors, and we're delighted to have you this year.
Yes. So I'm one of the co-mentors for the retooling of Jenkins.io project. So that is something that we started in Google Summer of Code 2023. And the idea is that we'll move from Awestruct to Antora, and we'll build on what was already done in the 2023 project. So if you're curious about that and want to know more, again, Google Summer of Code Gitter channel is a great place to start the conversation and have those conversations. It is the central place for any communications about Google Summer of Code. There aren't specific channels for the projects or anything like that yet. Not that there necessarily will be. But if you start a thread, you'll get the response there. So
Thank you.
thank you, Bruno. I appreciate that. And I'm co-mentor with Chris Stern because Chris is really the lead mentor on there. Chris has been the one that was working on the project in the first place. So really excited to work with Chris more closely. I really appreciate their insight and their work and everything they bring to the project. So that's really exciting for me as a mentor and getting to work with all the new contributors too. Next up's the Chinese documentation site. So brief backstory on this. This was originally thought to be an idea of retiring the Chinese Jenkins documentation site. Found that there are 58,000 installations of the Chinese localization plugin. So this is a non-insignificant number of users who are accessing this. Rongsha and Mark discussed it at FOSDEM. They're looking to check with the actual statistics and figure out what that actually looks like. And Chris has created an issue to initiate a new process, adding the native Chinese localization to Jenkins core natively. Chris isn't here right now, so we won't be able to ask any questions about that. But there has been some process. There's been movement there, and we're looking at what that solution might look like. And it may be the translation or localization process like Chris has provided here natively being implemented. But we have to do some more work and some more discovery on what that looks like. Yeah. Okay, great. Next up is the LTS releases. So we have the next LTS release is scheduled for April 2nd. That'll be 2.492.3. I've created the changelog and upgrade guide that's available for review, and the release candidate build was made available yesterday. So everything, no, not yet.
Almost. It was made available today.
Yeah, depending on where you're living in the world. Maybe it was yesterday in some part of the world. You never know. But
No,
it was early morning my time.
I'm pretty sure it was today in every part of the world that I lock in. It would have been nice, but no, I'm pretty sure that even very close to the international date line, it was still today. We missed by a day, but
That's fair.
we tried hard. We really did try hard to make it on the day we planned.
And I was going off the calendar, not the actual available release, so that's on me. But it was a bit of a challenging release, so I'm glad everything was able to get straightened out. The changelog is only for a couple of entries so that we could actually get the release candidate out and get everything working as it needed. And then we'll have the next 0.1 release coming at the end of April. And the discussion has been started for what that baseline is going to use. There's discussions around 2.502, potentially 2.503, so that we can make sure that there's a necessary update for Jetty included. So time will tell, but the discussion's being had right now on the developer mailing list. If you're curious, join that, and you can be kept in the loop for any information about releases. And then there were 2 security advisories published in March already. We had one at the beginning of the month for Jenkins Core. and then one just yesterday that was specifically for plugins. The Anchor Chain plugin, the EDDSA API plugin, and the Zoho Q Engine plugin specifically were the parts of the security advisory from yesterday. So nothing to do with this week's weekly release. 2.502 went out pretty well and everything looks okay there. So everything looks good. The Jenkins Contributor Summit was really great. We've gone over this several times. Lots of good stuff comes from there. Lots of great work, lots of great discussions, a great experience for everyone overall. And we'll recap it.
Yeah, and sorry Mark hasn't done that yet, and he won't do it this weekend because this week or this weekend because other things are higher on my list. Sorry, it'll be next week at the best.
That's okay, Mark. No worries. We can keep talking about it, but I think at this point we'll probably drop it from the itinerary just going forward. There's no need to bring this up every 2 weeks. So, yeah, we'll get there when we get there. We'll publish it when it's available. And yeah, that's all for that. The Jenkins Contributor Summit's been a really great experience the last couple of years, so it's really just nice that we get to even have that event. Talking about it's great, but yeah, it's the experience more than anything else. Next up, so just a moment. So I'm trying to make sure that this is a consistent part of Doc's office hours, but I want to thank and highlight people that are submitting work and creating content for the site. So there were more updates from Jim to the Kubernetes documentation, which is great. Really happy to have that and love working with Jim, learning more about Kubernetes and just having him there for his insights. Thanks to Chris for their updates to the thank you note. There were some adjustments that needed to be made and some things that needed to be fixed when it came to single repository versus multiple repository notes. So they did the work to fix that up. So thank you very much to Chris for that. Raviraj updated the Apache reverse proxy docs for the Unix domain socket support, which is great to have. That's something that we have been looking to add in for a little bit now. So thanks to Raviraj for their work and their efforts and their enthusiasm for taking that on and getting that added. And then Clinton and Pratik, they just did some work on the merchandise page, respectively, to remove broken shop links and add the working shop links, which is great. We've got that updated now. So now we have links that are correct, updated, and leading to the right places. A couple of the links were oddly broken or not available because there was one of the shops updated towards the end of 2024, and so the link was all messed up and not leading to anything that we had available. So thanks to both of them for their work on that. And then lastly, sorry.
Welcome, sir.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Pratik. I appreciate you being here and I appreciate the work. And really excited for, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you're getting geared up for Google Summer of Code as well as Birajit. So just great to have you both here and being part of the project. And then lastly, Colleen recently created the Leroy Jenkins logo, which that's just fun. And I really appreciate that as someone who's terminally online. That's really nice and that's funny. So thanks very much, Colleen, for that as well. And I think this is great too, because this list here just really highlights the different ways to participate and contribute to the project, from adding documentation to updating features on the site itself to creating artwork for the project. Like, these are all really great ways to get involved. They're not very intensive efforts in terms of the amount of work they might need in most cases, but they are very possible for people that maybe are not the most, for myself, I'm not very heavily knowledgeable when it comes to creating code, writing code, etc. But the documentation's where I'm able to help out and work on. Creating artwork is a different skill set, and it's really nice to have the different potential, the different people, the different backgrounds contributing their work. So thank you to everyone for all their work and just being part of the project. So Mark, for the Alpha Omega documentation project idea, have you heard anything further since, or is this kind of we're just still waiting to see what happens?
So I sent a message to Michael Windsor and got a reply. They're still reviewing and discussing. So as far as I can tell, there is still a potential. I'm not sure how strong the potential is. That's impossible for me to guess right now.
That's fair. And yeah, Alpha Omega, prior to this project idea, they were the um, organization that provided the grant for the CSP project in Jenkins that took place over the last 3 months of 2024. That allowed Yaroslava Fenkin and Shlomo Dahan to help enhance the CSP in Jenkins and the plugin ecosystem as well. So lots of great work thanks to their support. It'd be great to have further support and further collaboration, but if they don't decide, that's okay too. The idea is that there be improving documentation, providing extended documentation for plugin developers, maintaining plugins, other tutorials that would be available for the heavier users and the deeper code. If that doesn't come to fruition with Alpha Omega, that doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means that we wouldn't have the ability to specifically dedicate resources for that someone to do that work, which is what the Alpha Omega project would allow us to do. So, um, that being said, it's been really nice having their collaboration, and there's no reason we can't continue to work towards that in the future as well. So we'll see. And then the last two topics here. So the plugin developer documentation, again, in line with the Alpha Omega documentation project idea, ideally it would be this would be another aspect that could come into play, but updating the plugin development documentation. Um, this was brought up by Antoine Neveu at one of our previous documentation office hours. Um, Basically, there's a lot of pages in the plugin developer docs that have work in progress notices, that are missing information, that are just not as um, complete as they could be. And it would be great to have that change and implement the documentation where it fits and have more complete and useful documentation in some cases. But it's not something that we've been able to work at just yet. We do need assistance with that and contributing and creating that documentation. And I'd like to talk with Antoine close more about this process and what he envisions for that. Um, if it's something that he's clearly passionate about, or at least considering heavily. So having his input and having an idea of where he'd like to see it go would be really great to understand what that process would look like and what we can do to help get from point A to point B. Um, I'll be working with him more closely in the coming months, so I'm hoping that we'll have an opportunity to sit down and chat more about it, and I can pick his brain and understand kind of what he has in mind when he said this sort or started this kind of topic. So more to come there, but um, there are definitely some areas in the plugin docs that would benefit from having documentation within it. And the last topic again, the Blue Ocean deprecation. This is something we've been discussing. It's not a surprise. Blue Ocean is not actively maintained outside of major security fixes, so it's not something that we are necessarily encouraging, but we have increased or decreased the visibility in terms of moving the Blue Ocean tutorials to the bottom of the page, updating the status note to ensure people are aware that this is in the state that it's in, that it's not going to be updated necessarily. And when the time comes, we're going to look at removing the Blue Ocean documentation from the Jenkins.io site. Um, that's going to mean changing the documentation overall to make sure that it's not referencing it. It's going to mean making sure that there are alternatives pointed to, like pipeline graph view and pipeline stage view. And if there's not an alternative, accepting that and instructing users that to be aware of that. So more work has to be done with that. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it is something that we are keep considering and keeping an eye on. And we'll be working with Olivia Lame, who's currently the maintainer of that, to just make sure everything's aligned with his output and what he is looking to do with it. So more to come on that as we go on, but just keep that in mind for the time being. And we've reached the end of the agenda. Is there any other topic that anyone wanted to bring up, discuss, throw out, have a conversation about?
That's it
Okay.
for me. Thanks.
Okay, great. So then we'll wrap up here. I'll stop the recording in just a moment. It'll be available in 24 to 48 hours and cross-posted over on Discourse, which is the best place to have continuing conversations about documentation, Google Summer of Code, any other Jenkins topics that you can think of as well. So thanks for coming, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.